Section 4 of Weird Tales, Jules de Grandin, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Tenant of Broussac, Part 2. He won the bet. For the first time since we had been at Broussac, Adrian Bixby was at the breakfast table the following day, and the healthy color of her cheeks and the clear sparkle of her lovely eyes told of a long, restful sleep. 2 more days passed, each seeing a marked improvement in her spirits and appearance. The purple semicircles beneath her eyes faded to a wholesome pink. Her laughter rippled like the sound of a purling brook among the shadows of the chateau's gloomy halls. "I gotta hand it to you, Doc," Bixby complimented me. "You've sure brought my little girl round in great shape. Name your figure and I'll pay the bill, and never paid one with a better heart, neither." "Dr. Trowbridge," Adrian accosted me one morning as I was about to join de Grandin in the library. "Remember what you said about importing a little bit of Oklahoma to France the other day? Well, I've just received a letter, the dearest letter, from Ray. He's coming over. He'll be here day after tomorrow, I think, and no matter what Mother says or does, we're going to be married right away. I've been Mrs. Bixby's daughter long enough. Now I'm going to be Mr. Kiefer's wife. If Mother makes Dad refuse to give us any money, it won't make the least little bit of difference. I taught school before Father got his money, and I know how to live as a poor man's wife. I'm going to have my man, my own man, and no one at all, shall keep him away from me one day longer." "Good for you," I applauded her rebellion. Without knowing young Kiefer, I was sure he must be a very desirable sort of person to have incurred the enmity of such a character as Bixby's wife. But next morning Adrian was not at breakfast, and the downcast expression of her father's face told his disappointment more eloquently than any words he could have summoned. "Reckon the girls had a little setback, Doc," he muttered, averting his eyes. His wife looked me fairly between the brows, and though she said never a word, I felt she considered me a pretty poor specimen of medical practitioner. "Mais non, Monsieur le Docteur," Roxane demurred when I knocked at Adrian's door. "You shall not waken her. The poor lamb is sleeping. She is exhausted this morning, and she shall have her sleep. I, Roxane, say so." Nevertheless, I shook Adrian gently, rousing her from a sleep which seemed more stupor than slumber. Come, my dear," I scolded. "This won't do, you know. You've got to brace up. You don't want Ray to find you in this condition, do you? Remember, he's due at Broussac tomorrow." "Is he?" she answered indifferently. "I don't care. Oh, doctor, I'm so tired." She was asleep again, almost at the last word. I turned back the covers and lifted the collar of her robe. About her body, purple as the marks of a whiplash, lay the wide, circular bruise, fresher and more extensive than it had been the day I first noticed it. "Death of my life," de Grandin swore when I found him in the library and told him what I had seen. "That sacré bruise again? Oh, it is too much. Come and see what else I have found this cursed day." Seizing my hand, he half led, half dragged me outdoors, halting at the clump of evergreens where he had fixed his nail-studded board beside the chateau wall. Ripped from its place and lying some 10 feet away was the board, its nails turned upward in the morning sunlight, and reminding me somehow of the malicious grin from a fleshless skull. "Why, how did this happen?" I asked. He pointed mutely to the moist earth in which the dwarf cedars grew, his hand shaking with excitement and rage. In the soft loam beside the place where the board had been fixed were the prints of 2 tiny bare feet. "What's it mean?" I demanded, exasperated at the way he withheld information from me, but his answer was no more enlightening than any of his former cryptic utterances. "The battle is joined, my friend," he replied through set teeth. "Amuse yourself as you will, can, this day. I go to Rouen right away, immediately, at once. There are weapons I must have for this fight besides those we now have. But it will be a fight to the death. Yes, par la croix, and we shall help Death reclaim his own too. Pardieu, am I not Jules de Grandin? Am I to be made a monkey of by one who preys on women? Morbleu, we shall see." And with that he left me striding toward the stables in search of a motor car, his little yellow moustache bristling with fury, his blue eyes snapping, French oaths pouring from him like spray from a garden sprinkler. It was dark before he returned, his green hat set at a rakish angle over his right ear, a long, closely wrapped brown paper parcel under his arm. "Eh bien," he confided to me with an elfish grin, "it required much argument to secure this. That old priest, he is a stubborn one, and unbelieving, almost as sceptical as you, friend Trowbridge." "What on earth is it?" I demanded, looking curiously at the package. Except that it was too long, it might have been an umbrella, judging by its shape. He winked mysteriously as he led the way to his room, where, having glanced about furtively, as though he apprehended some secret watcher, he laid the bundle on the bed and began cutting the string securing its brown paper swaddling close with his pocket-knife. Laying back the final layer of paper, he uncovered a long sword, such a weapon as I had never beheld outside a museum. The blade was about 3½ feet in length, tapering from almost 4 inches in width at the base to 1.5 inches at the tip, where it terminated in a beveled point. Unlike modern weapons, this one was furnished with 2 sharpened edges, almost keen enough to do duty for a knife, and instead of the usual groove found on the sides of sword blades, its centre presented a distinct ridge where the steep bevels met at an obtuse angle as they sloped from the edges. The handle, made of ivory or some smoothly polished stone, was long enough to permit a 2-handed grip, and the hilt, which crossed the blade at a right angle, turned downward toward the point, its ends terminating in rather clumsily carved cherubs' heads. Along the blade, apparently carved rather than etched, marched a procession of miscellaneous angels, demons and men at arms with a mythological monster, such as a griffin or dragon, thrown in for occasional good measure. Between these crudely carved figures I made out the letters of the motto, De Gratia, by the grace of God. "Well?" I asked wonderingly as I viewed the ancient weapon. "Well," he repeated mockingly. Then, "had you as many blessings on your head as this old bit of carved metal has received, you would be a very holy man indeed, friend Trowbridge. This sword, it was once strapped to the thigh of a saint, it matters not which one, who fought the battles of France when France needed all the champions, saintly or otherwise, she could summon. For centuries it has reposed in a very ancient church at Rouen, not indeed as a relic, but as a souvenir scarcely less venerated. When I told the curé I proposed borrowing it for a day or more, I thought he would die of the apoplexy forthwith, but he gave his diminutive moustache a complacent tweak. Such was my power of persuasion that you see before you the very sword." "But what under heaven will you do with the thing, now you've got it?" I demanded. "Much, perhaps," he responded, picking up the weapon, which must have weighed at least 20 pounds, and balancing it in both hands as a wood chopper holds his axe before attacking a log. Nom de Buc! He glanced suddenly at his wrist watch, and replaced the sword on his bed. "I do forget myself. Run, my friend, fly! Fly like the swallow to Mademoiselle Adrien's room, and caution her to remain within, at all hazards. Bid her close her windows too, for we know not what may be abroad, or what can climb a wall this night. See, that stubborn, pig-foolish maid of hers has instruction to lock her mistress's door on the inside, and should mademoiselle rise in the night and desire to leave, on no account permit her to pass. You understand?" "No, I'll be hanged if I do," I replied. "What? Non, non," he almost shrieked. "Waste not time nor words, my friend. I desire that you should do as I say. Hurry, I implore you. It is of the importance, I do assure you." I did as he requested, having less difficulty than I had expected concerning the windows, since Adrian was already sunk in a heavy sleep, and Roxane possessed the French peasant's inborn hatred of fresh air. "Good, very, very good," de Grandin commented when I rejoined him. "Now we shall wait until the second quarter of the night. Then, perhaps I show you something to think about in the after years, friend Trowbridge." He paced the floor like a caged animal for a quarter hour, smoking one cigarette after another. Then, "Let us go," he ordered curtly, picking up the giant sword and shouldering it as a soldier does his rifle. Allez, feu. We tramped down the corridor toward the stairway, when he turned quickly, almost transfixing me with the sword blade, which projected 2 feet and more beyond his shoulder. "One more inspection, friend Trowbridge," he urged. "Let us see how it goes with Mademoiselle Adrienne. Eh bien, do we not carry her colours into battle this night?" "Never mind that monkey business," we heard a throaty feminine voice command as we approached Adrienne's room. "I've stood about all I intend to from you. Tomorrow you pack your clothes, if you've any to pack, and get out of this house." "Eh, what is this?" de Grandin demanded as we reached the chamber door and beheld Roxane weeping bitterly, while Mrs. Bixby towered over her like a cochin hen bullying a half-starved sparrow. "I'll tell you what it is," replied the irate mistress of the house. "I came to say good night to my daughter a few minutes ago, and this hussy refused to open the door for me. I soon settled her, I can tell you. I told her to open that door and get out. When I went into the room I found every window locked tight, in this weather too. Now I catch her hanging around the door after I ordered her to her room. Insubordination, rank insubordination it is. She leaves this house bright and early tomorrow morning, I can tell you." "Oh, Monsieur Trowbridge, Monsieur Grandin," sobbed the trembling girl, "I did but attempt to obey your orders, and she drove me from my duty. Oh, I am so sorry." De Grandin's small teeth shut with a snap like a miniature steel trap. "And you forced this girl to unbar the door?" he asked, almost incredulously, gazing sternly at Mrs. Bixby. "I certainly did," she bridled, "and I'd like to know what business it is of yours, if—" He brushed by her, leaping into the bedroom with a bound which carried him nearly 2 yards beyond the door-sill. We looked past him toward the bed. It was empty. Adrian Bixby was gone. Why, where can she be?" Mrs. Bixby asked, her domineering manner temporarily stripped from her by surprise. "I'll tell you where she is," de Grandin, white to the lips, shouted at her. "She is where you have sent her, you meddling old ignoramus. You, oh mon Dieu, if you were a man, how I should enjoy cutting your heart out." "Say, see here," she began, her bewilderment sunk in anger, but he cut her short with a roar. "Silence, you! To your room, foolish, criminally foolish one, and pray le bon Dieu on your bare knees that the pig ignorance of her mother shall not have cost your daughter her life this night. Come, Trowbridge, my friend, come away. The breath of this woman is a contamination, and we must hurry if we are to undo her fool's work. Pray God we are not too late." We rushed downstairs, traversed the corridors leading to the older wing of the house, wound our way down and down beneath the level of the ancient moat till we stood before the entrance of the chapel. "Ah!" de Grandin breathed softly, lowering his sword point a moment as he dashed the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "No sound, friend Trowbridge. Whatever happens, whatever you may see, do not cry out. 'Tis death to one we seek to save if you waken her." Raising his hand, he signed himself quickly with the cross, muttering an indistinct ignominy, while I gaped in amazement to see the cynical, scoffing little man of science shedding his agnosticism and reverting to a simple act of his childhood's faith. Lifting the sword in both hands, he gave the chapel door a push with his foot, whispering to me, "Hold high the lantern, friend Trowbridge. We need light for our work." The rays from my lamp streamed across the dark, vaulted chapel, and I nearly let the lantern crash to the floor at what I beheld. Standing before the ancient, tumble-down altar, her nude, white body gleaming in the semi-dark like a lovely, slender statue of sun-stained marble, was Adrian Bixby. Her long rippling hair, which had always reminded me of molten gold in the assayer's crucible, streamed over her shoulders to her waist. One arm was raised in a gesture of absolute abandon, while her other hand caressed some object which swayed and undulated before her. Parted in a smile such as Circe, the enchantress, might have worn when she lured men to their ruin. Her red lips were drawn back from her gleaming teeth, while she crooned a slow, sensuous melody the like of which I had never heard, nor wished to hear again. My astounded eyes took this in at first glance, but it was my second look which sent the blood coursing through my arteries like river water in zero weather. About her slender, virginal torso, ascending in a spiral from hips to shoulders, was the spotted body of a gigantic snake. The monster's horrid, wedge-shaped head swung and swayed a scant half-inch before her face, and its darting, lambent tongue licked lightly at her parted lips. But it was no ordinary serpent which held her, a laughing prisoner in its coils. Its body shone with alternate spots of green and gold, almost as if the colors were laid on in luminous paint. Its flickering tongue was red and glowing as a flame of fire, and in its head were eyes as large and blue as those of humankind, but set and terrible in their expression as only the eyes of a snake can be. Scarcely audible, so low his whisper was, de Grandin hissed a challenge as he hurled himself into the chapel with one of his lithe, cat-like leaps. "Snake thou art, Raymond de Broussac, and snake thou shalt become. Gardez-vous." With a slow, sliding motion, the great serpent turned its head, gradually released its folds from the leering girl's body, and slipped to the floor, coiled its length quickly, like a giant spring, and launched itself like a flash of green and gold lightning at de Grandin. But quick as the monster's attack was, de Grandin was quicker. Like the shadow of a flying hawk, the little Frenchman slipped aside, and the reptile's darting head crashed against the chapel's granite wall with an impact like a wave slapping a ship's bow. "One," counted de Grandin in a mocking whisper, and swung his heavy sword, snipping a 2-foot length from the serpent's tail as neatly as a seamstress snips a thread with her scissors. "En garde, fils du diable!" Writhing, twisting, turning like a spring from which the tension has been loosed, the serpent gathered itself for another onslaught, its malign, human-seeming eyes glaring implacable hatred at de Grandin. Not this time did the giant reptile launch a battering ram-blow at its adversary. Instead, it reared itself 6 feet and more in the air, and drove its wicked, scale-armored head downward with a succession of quick shifting jabs, seeking to take de Grandin off his guard and enfold him in its crushing coils. But like a veritable chevaux de frise of points, de Grandin's sword was right, left, and in between. Each time the monster's head drove at the little man, the blade engraved with the ancient battle cry stood in its path, menacing the hateful blue eyes and flashing, backward curving fangs with its sharp, tapering end. "Aha!" de Grandin mocked. "To fight a man is a greater task than to bewitch a woman, n'est-ce pas, Monsieur le Serpent? Ha! You have it!" Like a wheel of living flame the saintly sword circled through the air. There was a sharp, slapping impact, and the steel sheared clean and clear through the reptile's body 6 inches behind the head. "Saha! Saha!" de Grandin's face was set in a look of incomparable fury. His small mouth was squared beneath his bristling moustache, like that of a snarling wildcat, and the sword blade rose and fell in a quick succession of strokes, separating the writhing body of the serpent into a dozen, 20, half a hundred sections. "Shh! No noise!" he cautioned, as I opened my lips to speak. "First clothe the poor child's nakedness. Her gown lies yonder on the floor." I looked behind me and saw Adrian's silk night-robe lying in a crumpled ring against the altar's lowest step. Turning toward the girl, revulsion and curiosity fighting for mastery of my emotions, I saw she still retained the same fixed, carnal smile. Her right hand still moved mechanically in the air as though caressing the head of the loathsome thing yet quivering in delayed death at her white feet. "Why, de Grandin," I exclaimed in wonder, "why, she's asleep." "Shh! No sound!" he cautioned again, laying his finger on his lips. "Slip the robe over her head, my friend, and pick her up gently. She will not know." I draped the silken garment about the unconscious girl, noticing as I did so that a long spiral bruise was already taking form on her tender flesh. "Careful, friend Trowbridge," de Grandin commanded, picking up the lantern and sword and leading the way from the chapel. "Carry her tenderly, the poor, sinned against one. Do not waken her, I beseech you. Pardieu, if that scolding mother of hers does but open her shrewish lips within this poor lamb's hearing this night, I shall serve her as I did the serpent. Mordieu, may Satan burn me if I do not so. Trowbridge, Trowbridge, my friend, come and see." De Grandin's voice sounded in my ear. I sat up, sleepily staring about me. Daylight had just begun. The grey of early morning still mingled with the first faint rose of the new day, and outside my window the blackbirds were singing. "Eh, what's up?" I demanded, swinging my feet to the floor. "Plenty, a very plenty, I do assure you," he answered, tugging delightedly first at one end of his moustache, then the other. "Arise, my friend, arise and pack your bags. We must go, immediately, at once, right away." He fairly pranced about the room while I shaved, washed, and made ready for the journey, meeting my bewildered demands for information only with renewed entreaties for haste. At last, as I accompanied him down the great stairway, my kit bags banging against my knees, "Behold," he cried, pointing dramatically to the hall below, "is it not superb?" On a couch before the great, empty fireplace of the chateau hall sat Adrian Bixby, dressed and ready for a trip, her slender white hand securely held in a pair of bronzed ones, her fluffy golden head pillowed on a broad homespun-clad shoulder. "Monsieur Trowbridge," de Grandin almost purred in his elation, "permit that I present to you Monsieur Ray Kiefer, of Oklahoma, who is to make happy our so dear Mademoiselle Adrienne at once, right away, immediately. Come, mes enfants, we must away." He beamed on the pair of lovers. "The American consul at Rouen, he will unite you in the bonds of matrimony, then away for that joyous wedding trip, and may your happiness never be less than it is this day. I have left a note of explanation for Monsieur, your father, mademoiselle. Let us hope he gives you his blessing. However, be that as it may, You have already the blessing of happiness." A large motor was waiting outside, Roxane seated beside the chauffeur, mounting guard over Adrian's baggage. "I did meet Monsieur Kiefer as he entered the park this morning," de Grandin confided to me as the car gathered speed, "and I did compel him to wait while I rushed within and roused his sweetheart and Roxane from their sleep." "Aha! What was it Madame the Scolding One did say to Roxane last night? That she should pack her clothes and leave the house bright and early this morning? Eh bien, she is gone, n'est-ce pas?" Shepherded by de Grandin and me, the lovers entered the consulate, emerging a few minutes later with a certificate bearing the great seal of the United States of America, and the information that they were man and wife. De Grandin hunted feverishly in the gutters, finally discovering a tattered old boot, and shied it after them. With the giggling Roxane, they set out for Switzerland, Oklahoma, and happiness. "Name of the little green man," he swore furtively, flicking a drop of moisture from his eye. "I am so happy to see her safe in the care of the good young man who loves her, that I could almost bring myself to kiss that so atrocious Madame Bixby." "Now, de Grandin," I threatened, as we seated ourselves in a compartment of the Paris express, "tell me more about it, or I shall choke the truth out of you." "La la!" he exclaimed in mock terror. "He is a ferocious one, this American. Very well then, cher ami, from the beginning. You will recall how I told you houses gather evil reputations, even as people do? They do more than that, my friend. They acquire character. Broussac is an old place. In it generations of men have been born and have lived and met their deaths, and the record of their personalities, all they have dreamed and thought and loved and hated, is written fair upon the walls of the house for him who cares to read. These thoughts I had when first I went to Broussac to trace down the reason for these deaths which drove tenant after tenant from the chateau. But fortunately for me, there was a more tangible record than the atmosphere of the house to read. There was the great library of the Broussac family, with the records of those of it who were good, those who were not so good, and those who were not good at all, written down. Among those records I did find this story. In the years before your America was discovered, there dwelled at Broussac one Signor Raymond, a man beside whom the wickedest of the Roman emperors was a mild-mannered gentleman. What he desired he took, this one, and as most of his desires leaned toward his neighbors' women-folk, he was busy at robbery, murder, and rapine most of the time. Eh bien, he was a mighty man, this Signor Raymond, but the Bishop of Rouen and the Pope at Rome were mightier. At last the wicked gentleman came face to face with the reckoning of his sins, for where the civil authorities were fearful to act, the Church stepped in and brought him to his trial. Listen to this which I found among the chronicles at the chateau, my friend. Listen and marvel. He drew a sheaf of papers from his portmanteau and began reading slowly, translating as he went along. Now when the day for the wicked Sieur Raymond's execution was come, a great procession issued from the church, where the company of faithful people were gone to give thanks that the earth was to be rid of a monster. Francois and Henri, the de Broussac wicked accomplices in crime, had become reconciled to Mother Church, and so were accorded the mercy of strangling before burning. But the Sieur Raymond would have none of repentance, but walked to his place of execution with the smile of a devil on his false, well-favoured face. And as he marched between the men at arms toward the stake set up for his burning, behold, the Lady Abbess of the convent of Our Lady of Mercy, together with the gentlewomen who were her nuns, came forth to weep and pray for the souls of the condemned, even the soul of the unrepentant sinner, Raymond de Broussac. And when the Sieur Raymond was come over against the place where the abbess stood with all her company, he halted between his guards and taunted her, saying, "What now, old hen? Dost thou seek the chicks of thy brood who are missing?" For it was a fact that 3 novices of the convent of Our Lady had been ravished away from their vows by this vile man, and great was the scandal thereof everywhere. Then did the lady abbess pronounce these words to that wicked man: "Snake thou art, Raymond de Broussac. Snake thou shalt become, and snake thou must remain, until some good man and true shall cleave thy foul body into as many pieces as the year hath weeks. And I, who beheld and heard all, do declare upon the rod that when the flames were kindled about that wicked man and his sinful body had been burned to ashes, a small snake, of the colours of green and gold, was seen by all to emerge from the fire, and, maugre the efforts of the men at arms to slay it, did escape to the forest of the chateau of Broussac." "Eh? What think you of that, friend Trowbridge?" he asked as he laid the papers beside him on the car-seat. "Rather an interesting medieval legend," I answered, "but hardly convincing today." "Truly," he conceded. "But as your English proverb has it, where there is much smoke there is apt to be a little flame. Other things I found in the records, my friend. For instance, the ashes of this Raymond de Broussac could not be buried in the chateau chapel among his ancestors and descendants, for the chapel is consecrated ground, and he died excommunicate. They buried him in what was then a pine forest hard by the house where he had lived his evil life, and on the stone which they set over him did they declare that there he lay forever. But 1 year from the day of his execution, as the de Broussac chaplain was reciting in his office in the chapel, he did see a green and gold snake, something thicker than a monk's girdle, but not so long as a man's forearm, enter that chapel, and the snake attacked the holy man so fiercely that he was much put to it to defend himself. Another year went by, and a servant bearing oil to refill the sanctuary lamp in the chapel did behold a similar snake, but now grown to the length of a man's arm, coiled above one of the tombs, and the snake also attacked that servant, and nearly slew him. From year to year the records go on. Often about Broussac was seen a snake, but each succeeding time it appeared larger than before. 2. There were strange stories current, stories of women of the locality who wandered off into the woods of Broussac, who displayed strange bruises upon their bodies, and who died eventually in a manner unexplained by any natural cause. One and all, mon ami, they were crushed to death. One was a member of the de Broussac family, a distant kinswoman of Sieur Raymond himself, who had determined to take the veil. As she knelt at prayer in the chapel one day, a great sleep fell upon her, and after that, for many days, she seemed distraught. Her interest in everything, even her religious vocation, seemed to wane to nothing. But it was thought that she was very saintly, for those who watched her did observe that she went often to the chapel by night. One morning she was found like the others, crushed to death, and on her face was the look not of the agony of dying, but the evil smile of an abandoned woman. Even in death she wore it. These things I had already read when that gamekeeper brought us news of the great snake he had seen in the garden, and what I had noted down as idle legend appeared possible to me as sober fact, if we could prove it. You recall how we spread flour on the chapel floor. You also recall the tracts we read in that flour next day. I remembered, too, how that poor Madame Biddle, who went mad in the Chateau Broussac, did so when she wandered one day by chance into the chapel, and I remembered how she does continually cry out of a great snake which seems to kiss her. The doctor who first attended her, too, when her reason departed, told me of the bruise. not to be explained, a spiral bruise about the poor lady's arm. Pardieu, I think I will test these legends some more, and I search and search until I find this wicked Sieur Ramon's grave. It was even as the chronicle wrote, for, to prove it, I made you go with me and read the inscription on the tombstone. Morbleu! Against my reason I am convinced, so I make what you called my combs, and place them so that their sharp nails would scratch the belly of any snake, if he really were a snake, who tried to crawl over them. Voila! Next day Mademoiselle Adrienne, she was better. Then I knew for a certainty that she was under the influence of this Sieur Ramon snake, even as that poor intending nun lady who met so tragic a death in the days of long ago. Something else I learned too. This demon snake, this relic of the accursed Raymond de Broussac, was like a natural snake. Material iron nails would keep him from the house his wickedness had so long under a spell. If this was so, then a natural weapon could kill his body if one man was but brave enough to fight him. Pardieu, I am that man, says Jules de Grandin to Jules de Grandin. But in the meantime, what do I see? Hélas! That wicked one now has so great an influence over poor Mademoiselle Adrienne that he can compel her, by his wicked will, to rise from her bed at night and go barefoot to the garden to tear away the barrier I have erected for her protection. Nom d'un coq! I am angered, I am furious. I decide this snake devil have already lived too long. I shall do even as the lady abbess prescribed, and slash it so loathly body as to many parts as the ear has weeks. Morbleu! I go to Rouen and obtain that holy sword. I come back, thinking I shall catch that snake waiting alone in the chapel for his assignation, since I shall bar Mademoiselle's way to him. And then her so stupid mother must needs upset all my plans, and I have to fight that snake in almost silence. I cannot shout and curse at him as I would, for if I raise my voice I may waken that poor, unconscious child, and then perhaps she goes mad, even as did Madame Biddle. Eh bien, perhaps it is for the best. Had I said all the foul curses I had in mind as I slew that blue-eyed snake, all the priests, clergymen, and rabbis in the world could scarce have shriven my soul from their weight. Voilà tout! We are in Paris once more, my friend. Come, let us have a drink. End of The Tenant of Broussac, Part 2.